us. Let's just go around the room, and those people that are either from the planning office or from the steering committee could introduce themselves. So once again, I'm Alex Shabowski, the facilitator.
So Neil Davis with Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and I also work on the planning office.
And Steve Diggin with Coastal First Nations, and I also work in the planning office. Sorry, Steve Diggin for Coastal First Nations, and I'm also with the planning office.
So you're the Prime Minister?
Is there something you need?
Okay, can we just quickly go around the room, please?
Greg Whiston, owner of Shearwater.
Thanks.
Crystal Anderson, resident, Danny Allen.
Ken Cripps, I'm working with the Central Coast First Nations on marine planning, but also I'm working on the planning office as well.
Okay, right here at this table?
Oh, Debbie Arwiller, I'm just a fishery observer.
Okay,
Heather Becker, I'm with Fisheries Conservation and Protection.
thanks. In the back there?
Kevin Hannigan, Rick Mechanic, Shearwater.
Right.
Steve Emery, Regional Board Director for Area 8.
Right.
Keith Amanda, Penny Island resident.
Phil Gladstone, commercial fisherman from Belleville.
Owen Thompson from Belleville.
Headed from the Manila Clam Fishery.
I'm Johanna Gordon Walker, and I'm a resident of Jenny Island, and I work at the Belleville Community School.
I'm Fred Buffini, I'm a resident of Jenny Island here.
Reg Moody, I'm from Bellabella, and I'm employed with the Gladstone Reconciliation Negotiations that are going on right now between Council and Vehicle.
Burnett, President.
I'm Sky Mitchell, the school teacher here.
Linda Mitchell, resident.
Sure, Gary, resident.
Okay, this table.
Jim Carpenter, Marine Planner.
You've already introduced yourself very well.
Now, Vickers, with the marine planning.
Same outfit.
Wilfred Humpton, I'm with the Marine Use Planning Committee.
Hillary?
I'm Hillary Ivey, I'm from DFO, and I work with the planning office. I'm Sharon Malloy, I'm a resident, and I work at the Shearwater Elementary School.
I'm Alex Chartrand, representing the 4 First Nations on the Central Coast on the steering committee.
Ingmar Lee, resident of Jenny Island.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Neil's going to give us a couple of brief presentations. One's an update, one's a more detail on these proposals, and then we want to get into that detailed discussion. We'll have a brief opportunity for just general questions, and at the end, we'll open it up again for any kinds of questions or comments that you have. Go ahead, Neil.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So I'll start with just sort of an update and an overview about where are we at with this initiative and what are we attempting to achieve. So a little bit of background about what we're doing, a little bit about the progress that we've made so far, and then what some of our next steps are. So what is PNCIMA? For those of you who are unfamiliar with the acronym, Alex mentioned it earlier. Skip to the back there. So it stands for the Pacific North Coast Integrated Management Area Initiative. And you can see the area that is included in the dark blue here. So it's a pretty large portion of the coast that extends down to the northern edge of Brooks Peninsula on the outside of Vancouver Island and down to Quadra Island very close to Campbell River on the inside. So that obviously includes all of the Central Coast marine waters there. And the initiative is a collaborative planning process that's intended to develop an integrated management plan for this area. The goal of that plan is to help ensure sustainable human use and to conserve the ecological diversity of that area. So this process to develop the plan is intended to include all of the different interested and affected parties in its development. So that includes commercial and recreational users, it includes First Nations, it includes the different government agencies who have some responsibility to manage these areas, it includes coastal communities, it includes environmental groups and others who have an interest. So why do we need something like integrated management planning? This slide just gives you sort of a brief example of all the different things that happen in oceans or that exist in oceans. So there are all these different values, and this is only a sample. I mean, we could continue to add layers to this map about all the different things that exist in oceans, but just to give you a quick sample, there are all these different things like a proposed wind farm up here in the North Hecate Strait, or salmon migration routes, the red lines that are following the coast here, salmon net fishing areas in the pink polygons, sponge reefs, which have been identified in Hecate Strait and Queen Charlotte Sound. And the list goes on. Areas that are important for the trawl fishery, areas where there have been oil and gas exploration drills, and areas where cruise ships are traversing the coast. And we could add a whole bunch more to this, but it gives you a sense that there's a lot of different things that are happening in oceans, and they're happening in the same places in some cases. And in some instances, perhaps those uses are not always compatible with one another. The other thing is they're not always necessarily being managed in an integrated way. So we may manage a fishery quite independently of the way that we manage marine transportation, independently of how we manage for things like proposed wind farms. So what we're proposing with this integrated management planning approach is that we start to ask ourselves, how do we coordinate that better? And how do we bring together the different user groups who have interest in these different values to be a part of that discussion about coordinating it? So why would we want to do something like integrated management planning, and what is it? So it's an attempt to balance some of our different objectives or interests in oceans, whether they be economic, or ecological, or cultural. It's an attempt to help sort of look into the future and ask what are our development needs and where might we meet those needs. It's a chance for us to improve the coordination between different management processes. So some of you may be involved in management processes or advisory processes, whether it be on a recreational fishery or a commercial fishery or something else again. So how do we sort of coordinate between all of those different processes that are happening? And how do we address some of the potential conflicts between different ocean uses? So if we have things that are happening in the same places, but they don't really complement each other very well, how do we build plans that allow them to coexist better? Also, it's an opportunity to create a bit more certainty and stability and sustainability in how oceans are managed, and strengthen the relationships between all of these different interest groups by having them all part of a discussion in the development of this plan. Lastly, it's important that we are respecting sort of the existing authorities that manage these different resources in these different areas, and that we're also obviously respecting existing Aboriginal rights and title in this process. So out of the integrated management planning process, the intention is that we're building a plan. And that plan is meant to include and reflect a common understanding of what are the values in this area. What do we all agree are the things that are important that we need to manage for? We also want to take an ecosystem-based approach to this, so that we're developing a plan that respects cultural values, socioeconomic values, and ecological values, and is finding that balance between them. We're also looking to develop marine spatial plans, so that's about sort of how do we ensure that things are happening in the places where they make sense. We want to make sure that we're linking that plan to the different management agencies who have some responsibility for managing fisheries, or for managing shipping traffic, or for managing aquaculture, or anything that may be relevant. We also want to build some sort of process where we're all talking to one another past the end of a plan development and into the future, so that if 10 years from now, when issues arise that relate to different uses in the marine environment, there's a place where we can have that discussion together about